Hi, I'm Pip Morpeth. I'm the CEO of MethodGrid, and today I'm delighted to announce the launch of the Praxis framework within MethodGrid. At MethodGrid, we care about helping teams get greater clarity, consistency, and efficiency in project delivery, and that was why it was a real honour for us to work with Adrian and the team to translate Praxis into a digital playbook. Now, today, we make that playbook available as an open resource for anyone that wants to apply best practice to their projects or that's going through their learning journey as part of their Praxis certification. We also today launch Praxis Enterprise, which allows you to tailor Praxis for your organization and translate it into ways of working. I'd really like to thank Adrian and the team, APMG and the BCS for supporting the launch. And please follow the links and access the resources. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to this conversation on a new MethodGrid launch, the Praxis Framework Grid. Today we're joined by Adrian Dooley, the founder and lead author of the Praxis Framework, to talk about the launch of the Praxis Framework on MethodGrid. We will focus on what this means for organizations trying to move from knowing best practice to actually applying it. Just a brief outline of Praxis. So Praxis is recognized as a comprehensive, holistic framework for project, program, and portfolio management. But like many frameworks, the real challenge has always been embedding it into day-to-day delivery. In this conversation, we'll explore what Praxis is in plain English, why it matters, and how bringing it into MethodGrid turns it from a body of knowledge into a practical, usable playbook teams can work with together. We'll also be looking at how organizations can tailor Praxis to their own context and where Praxis Enterprise takes things next. Adrian, as I mentioned, is the founder and lead author of the Praxis Framework. He has had a long career in project management, including managing a consultancy and training company, serving as head of professional development at the Association for Project Management, and launching the UK's first independent magazine devoted to project management. His focus is now on supporting individuals and teams to embed good practices into their organizations and build sustainable delivery habits over the long term. Hi, Adrian.
Hi, Luke.
I think we'll move into the first question, which is definitely one for you to answer. And that is, for anyone new to it, what is the Praxis Framework?
Yes, well, I think I need to address the terminology initially, because the word framework has become very fashionable to use for just about anything, whether it be tools, techniques, methodologies. All of a sudden they've all become frameworks. For me, a framework is very simple. It's a structure that makes sense of the very broad discipline of project and program management, and allows you to add content that makes that real. So the framework part of Praxis is simply a taxonomy and a terminology that provides that central structure. The Praxis part is the detailed content, the method, the functions, and the tools and techniques that help you apply those.
Yeah, I think that is a very clear explanation, and I completely agree with you. I think framework gets thrown into a lot of conversations where it probably doesn't even apply, and it's maybe diluted its definition slightly.
Yes.
What are some, I guess, moving into kind of a more of a detailed question then, what are some of the challenges or user stories organizations have had in adopting and implementing Praxis that you've seen during your career?
I think the issues organizations have are not unique to Praxis. I mean, a lot of what I do is inspired by something called Cobb's paradox, which I can't remember word for word, but basically in 1992, Martin Cobb said that we know how to manage projects, but they still fail. So what's going wrong? And what I've learned over my career is that there are a number of barriers. The problem isn't that we don't have the techniques and the good practices. problems are to do with the cultural attitude towards applying them. And those are the challenges that Praxis seeks to address. So in order to address those, you have to have the content. You have to have all the detail of what makes up the discipline of project, program, and portfolio management in its wide diversity. But whereas so much other guidance stops at the point of providing information about those good practices, what Praxis does is to say, okay, well, that's the easy part. Here's the good practice. Now what do you do with it? How do you apply it? How do you make it work? How do you create the right habits in people that make doing things well just a day-to-day habit rather than something we have to actively think about all the time?
Yeah, I completely agree. That leads me on to probably two strong follow-up questions, and then I'll come back to that best practice piece. But in terms of that day-to-day application of Praxis, what problems do you think Praxis helps solve then as you take that guidance and you start applying it from in a day-to-day perspective?
Well, there are a number. I'll pick out some of the key ones. I think something that we've seen recently, there are some longer term issues, but if I just deal with something that's cropped up relatively recently, is project management guidance is big business. This has resulted in what I would refer to as commoditization and compartmentalization. So guidance tends to focus in on a limited section of the overall discipline. So what we've done at Praxis is we started off by creating this cornerstone, which we call the delivery model, the Praxis delivery model.
Yeah.
So what that does is it makes sense of the fact that we have projects, programs, portfolios. People talk about agile projects, waterfall projects, hybrid projects, and it all becomes very compartmentalized. Really, in order to be competent project managers and for organizations to embed good practices, we need to have a much more holistic view.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing that Praxis addresses. Secondly, one example would be what I call Monday morning syndrome. As you said in the intro, I ran a training and consultancy company for 25 years, and we used to deliver many courses. And I think people came on the courses, they learned a lot about good practice, possibly even took an exam in it on the Friday afternoon, went away, had a nice relaxing weekend, and Monday morning they go into the office faced with messages and emails, and they then don't get that chance to start embedding the good practice because they're too busy getting on with the day-to-day, the business of day-to-day work that was exactly the same as it was before they went on the course.
Yeah.
So what we seek to do is to provide support for people, the tools that will help them from that Monday morning onwards, to actually embed and use the good practices to really make a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common problem we see with some of our clients as well, that so many people are on the ground firefighting, consistently solving problems every day.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of time to do any forward thinking and start actually planning and integrating some of these guidances and these frameworks. And they just end up becoming a side of the desk responsibility that ultimately, after a couple of weeks, when things start wrapping up in their day-to-day work, get left on the side. So I can definitely relate to that. I guess then as a follow-up to that, what, in terms of helping that tailoring, that guidance and that usability from a day-to-day aspect, what is it about Praxis that helps stop or avoid that from happening when you're an employee on the ground?
Okay, well, if I just briefly say that the first thing Praxis does is to take this holistic view. So a lot of guides will focus on one of those compartments I was talking about. Whereas what Praxis does is to say, well, let's look at projects, programs, and portfolios in the round. Let's look at agility as a spectrum, not agile on one hand and waterfall on the other. And then against that backdrop, there are 5 main sections. So you've got the functions that make up the discipline of project management. That's things like stakeholder management, risk management, scheduling, and so on. Then there's the life cycle based processes that allow you, that guide you in the use of those functions over the course of the project life cycle. Using those 2 things well means that as an individual, you develop competency. So there's a competency framework in there. And at an organizational level, what you're doing is you're developing organizational capability maturity. So those are the first 4 areas. And then backing that up, there's an encyclopedia with all the different tools and techniques for earned value, risk management, and models of human behavior, and so on. So that puts all the discipline of project management and its application in place. But then we've got to address how you bring that into action, how you make it work for you. And there are a series of tools in there which look at things like how different personalities in a team will internalize and interpret that good practice in different ways, and you have to take that into account. There's an assessment tool, which, you know, as soon as you say assessment tool, people are going to start turning off. But there's a very good book called The Checklist Manifesto. And it's written by an American surgeon who was employed by the World Health Organization. And to cut a long story short, what he did was eventually to improve surgical mortality by 40%. So this was literally a matter of life and death. And his approach improved, meant 40% fewer people died after surgery. So we took inspiration from that, coupled with the CMMI capability maturity model, and developed a tool which says, okay, let's build capability maturity in the organization. How do we do that? Well, it's by getting the members of the team to actually apply good practices. And if we give them a checklist that helps them do that, surely that's going to have the desired effect. Make it 360, get stakeholders and team members and project managers all on the same page. And what you've got is a very bottom-up incremental way of developing and embedding the right habits.
Yeah, I think it's also worth calling out. I think you've kind of talked about it in that answer, but I think that is part of what separates Praxis Framework out from other P3M frameworks as well, is that holistic approach. Yeah. And not dividing everything up by agile and waterfall in its communication. Is there anything else you want to kind of add on that around how Praxis separates itself from other P3M frameworks?
I think in a very brief, pithy way, what we're saying is that most other guidance, because as I say, guidance has to fit onto a framework, and you'll find that even if you get, for example, if you get guidance on projects, programs, and portfolios from a single publisher, they're not consistent. So it's the framework that we've devised that makes our approach to all those things consistent. But then the real difference is that once you've delivered that good practice, and I should point out why I'm talking about good practice rather than best practice, because I think that's important. A practice can only be best in a very limited context. When we're looking at the wide diversity of project management, there are a lot of good practices which are the best in particular contexts, but you have to know enough to pick the right ones for the right circumstance. So we provide all those good practices. Coming back to this Monday morning idea, most providers of good practice say, well, there it is, get on with it. Take the exam on a Friday, Monday, sort yourself out. For us, Monday's where it starts. You've done the easy bit. You've been on the course, you've gained the knowledge, you've read the book, but now this is where the hard work starts. This is where you have to apply it. This is where you have to make it have an effect on your projects and programs. And what we need to do is to be there to support you and help you do that. And one of the things that I've managed not to mention so far is the fact that it's all free, because that's one of the barriers that we seek to break down. There's a well-known, very popular guidance gets updated as we've seen very recently. And you want the updated version? Well, that's £100. Thank you very much. Whereas, and of course, in 3 or 4 years' time, you'll have to do that again, because we'll have had a different group of authors putting a different set of preferences on how that guidance is constructed. But what we do is to say, no, it's all on the web, it's all free, everything we build around it is free. And because it's on the web, it's continually updated and augmented and further developed. That, I think, also breaks down a barrier to the implementation of the good practice. 100%.
And I think most people listening to this would say that is very commendable, and I think it's much appreciated, probably in that project management delivery space. I'll ask you just 2 more questions on kind of overall practice things, and then maybe we can talk about how we're going to take this and then apply it from a method grid perspective and add value to the practice framework and how it's delivered. So you talked about best practice there, and the separation between best practice and good practice. But in terms of highlighting and finding those areas that are best practice across multiple kind of different functionalities and bringing them into your own specific project framework, where do you think individuals and businesses struggle most in going about applying that best practice, and how can Praxis as a framework help address that?
As you know, when you ask it, that's a big question.
Very good question.
But I think to some extent, project management has changed a lot over the last 20 years. There were certain sort of problems that were always there in terms of applying good practice. But over the last 20 years, I think that's become worse rather than better. And this comes back to what I was talking about, the sort of the commercialization, commoditization, and compartmentalization of the discipline of project management. We're trying to, in some ways, rewind and get back to this more holistic attitude. People then struggle with implementing this because life gets in the way. And significantly, this compartmentalization means that their view is somewhat limited. So they're increasingly trained to think, I have to define whether my project is an agile project or a waterfall project. Or they have to think, well, is this a project or is this a program? Because there's not a distinct boundary between the two. They overlap, they blend into each other. People need that frame of mind, that confidence that says, I understand the big picture. I understand how different things work in different parts of that big picture, and I will select the bits that are right for my organization. But again, I can't stress enough that in a way, the irony is that we as the project management profession don't practice what we preach. We will preach that projects should have defined benefits, and we will probably have to manage change in order to realize those benefits. So why is it when we have a project which is to implement and embed good practices that we don't apply those very simple principles? We just send people on courses and then expect them to come back and change their behavior in an environment and culture which hasn't changed at all.
Yeah.
So it's not only the individual that needs to have the big picture, the organization needs to have the big picture. We are sending people on courses, we are investing in their development as good project managers for a reason. That reason is to deliver projects and programs more effectively and more efficiently. That's the benefit. We can place a value against that benefit. We have to recognize that some changes have to be implemented in order to realize those benefits. That's just basic, simple project management 101. But we don't do it when we're implementing project management.
Yeah, and I've seen that. I feel like another area that is so consistent is in lessons learned. You know,
Absolutely.
The number of people who at the end of the project write it down, it goes into a lessons learned folder on SharePoint. I mean, I have rarely been on a project where a lessons learned folder has been accessed during the project delivery to look back and see what was done last and what we can learn from it.
Yes, it's so true. In fact, I've got a database of about 3,000 lessons learned from a freedom of information request. And if you read through them, you know, the overarching theme that you read is, we didn't do the obvious things that we learned about on the first day of the most basic project management course. And those same mistakes are made over and over again. There's a wonderful quote, which again, I haven't got in front of me, so I won't be able to repeat it word for word. Douglas Adams, author of The Hitchhiker's Guide. And he said something along the lines of, mankind is unique in its ability to learn from the mistakes of others, and also unique in their disinclination to do so.
Yeah.
That's pretty much where we are on the lessons learned front.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it seems to be a common theme that's basically, I mean, it's existed throughout my career, definitely, and I'm sure it's existed many decades into the past as well. We'll do one more question, because I'm sure that people who might be listening to this and already have a framework that they are working on might be saying to themselves, okay, this is great. I've already got a methodology and a framework that we use within our business. So the question is, where can Praxis still add value despite the fact that I've got my own framework?
I'm at risk of repeating myself. This sort of culture that's grown up over the last 20, 30 years, people will tend to identify with particular compartments. You know, I do things according to Prince. You do things according to the PMBOK or PM squared or some other particular set of guidance. And they see them as being very different. I suppose in a way they're a bit like sort of us and gorillas. Yeah, we do look very different, but we share 97% of our DNA. And if you are sad like me and you sit down and compare those different guides, you'll find that fundamentally they're saying all the same thing. It's just all wrapped up in a different wrapper. So when I talk about the framework side of Praxis, you know, there's nothing special about it. There's nothing unique or revolutionary. It is a framework which, broadly speaking, is the same as every other way of slicing and dicing the discipline of project management. And really the value is in what we build around that framework. So again, you know, we're in danger of falling foul of the different way people use that word framework. But ultimately, whatever scheme of operation, for want of a better phrase, that an organization uses, you will find at the center of it are some very basic common principles. And I would suggest that any good scheme that an organization has will have the same principles as Praxis. So you will find that it's easy to match one against the other and retain what you've built whilst gaining more content and application and guidance from Praxis Framework.
Yeah, and I guess because of that similarity and because Praxis is more of a holistic look, is you can probably plug some gaps by referring back to Praxis and using the principles within Praxis to help plug some gaps that may be usable within your own methodology and business processes.
Yeah, and as I say, it is free and it's covered by something called a Creative Commons license, which means that you can use it in any way you want. All we ask you to do is recognize the source. For example, I was contacted by somebody, an organization that was running courses and systems for PMOs. And they said, can we use Praxis content in our systems for PMOs? And I said, yeah. Well, don't we need to pay a license or royalty, or can we just no, you can just use it. Just say where you got the information from, that's all. And yeah, that's very quickly that can lead you into the, well, if it's free, it can't be any good. Well, if you think about life, if you use Wikipedia, if you use the web, if you use the internet, your whole experience is based on people who've given stuff away for free, whether it be Linus Torvald, Jimmy Wales, or the double-barreled name that has just escaped me, Tim Berners-Lee. There you go.
And I think it's very easy to fall into the marketing trap of if a product isn't popular or isn't selling well, increase the price, and suddenly it is.
Yes.
So you can have that completely the other way around.
Very much. That's why they used to put weights in TV remote controls, because if they were heavy, people thought they were better quality.
Yeah. So we'll move on to kind of section 2. So moving away from the Praxis framework and your really, really useful and definitive insight into what the framework can offer, and just a little bit into what we're doing in terms of bringing that collaboration with the Praxis framework and MethodGrid. Mm-hmm. So to start us off, why have we brought Praxis into MethodGrid at all? And what gap does that help it fill, rather than just reading documents?
Okay, well, as I said before, one of the barriers that we face is converting theory into practice. And of course, this isn't just about the project managers. This is about their entire team, both the delivery team and the broader team of stakeholders, people like the sponsor and so on. So, if I can continue to use that metaphor of the Monday morning, once the project manager has gained this knowledge of good practice, Monday morning, what do? They're sitting there, they're faced with the same problems they had before, but they need to change the way they do things. So we're constantly looking for tools and approaches that assist and support them in that change. So if you've got something like MethodGrid, you've got that visual presentation of the functions and the processes that they now need to manage. And it's a visual presentation which they can share with the rest of the team. So it provides that catalyst for converting the theory, for want of a better term, to actual practice. Oh, here we are, this is what we need to do. Have we done this? There's something you need to do here. Here are some links to information which will help you do those things. And let's start moving through this grid together. I think that's vital for actually embedding the good practices.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And just to kind of jump off from that visualization point, I think that's one of the kind of key USPs of MethodGrid, is that it is visually appealing. So for anyone who's unfamiliar, the way that MethodGrid is set out is in a grid format. So along your columns at the top are stages. And so in this case, for Praxis, you have your identification, definition, delivery, closure stages. And then along your rows, or what we call themes, that it's broken down into things like governance, stakeholder management, business case management, planning. And at the cross section, you'll have a deliverable or a key activity, and there'll be a multitude. So you can click into there, and within that deliverable or key activity, you'll have information such as kind of a description of what this is and why it's needed, what's the purpose of it, key references, lessons learned, as we mentioned before, the key tasks and controls that are required to deliver this or finalize this activity. And so I think one thing that MethodGrid helps in terms of that team dynamic is accessing the right information at the right time. Mm-hmm. So it's stage one, identification. I've got to do some governance things. I can see exactly which governance things I need to do at this point in time. I can click in, I know how to do it, and I know what needs to be done in order to deliver it. And that can be useful from anybody who's just starting off within their project management career, and they're engaging with Praxis for the first time, or it can be useful for a senior leadership team member who wants to understand where a project's at, or help give effective guidance to their wider team.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting observation that MethodGrid and Praxis had completely different births, creations, in different contexts, different business issues, and yet in terms of structure, they fit perfectly, which tells you something about the thinking that's gone into them both, in that two completely different teams, two completely different businesses approaching this from a different angle, came up with two things, a framework and a way of delivering that framework, which meshed perfectly. It kind of suggests that we both got something right there, I think.
Yeah, I think you're completely right, actually. I'd never thought about it that way, but there's just a logical flow, and it lets you move it from one to the other due to that logical flow. It's very true. I think in terms of, I guess, one aspect of, or a question for you is, there's a difference between knowing the framework, so knowing Praxis, and actually operationalizing it and delivering it. I think one thing we do try and do, or we do in MethodGrid, is we're not only providing that knowledge management, knowing the framework, but we're also trying to apply that project management, operationalizing it with tasks and controls, with things that you can deliver. And we try and do it at a reasonably high level, so it's not bogged down in kind of, add document X to SharePoint here. That's something you can have, you can give the freedom to your team to do that. But as somebody who's so embedded in that Praxis world, what do you think is the difference between kind of knowing the framework and operationalizing it in that way? And how can MethodGrid help support?
Well, I think, again, this speaks to one of the perhaps unintended consequences of the growth of certifications over the last 20 years. And let me be honest, I was, as head of professional development at the APM, I was part of that generation that created these things in the first place. But unfortunately, some people have come to regard them as an end in themselves. And I'm just sort of using this as an indicator of something that you've highlighted there. So people gain these knowledge-based certifications. They go and gain a lot of knowledge of good practice. And you will see lots of people on LinkedIn saying, oh, I've got this certification, now I'm a project manager. Now, you've got the knowledge to be a project manager, but you haven't done it yet.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I can say as an insider, when bodies offer certifications, they might have thousands and thousands of people doing their knowledge certifications, but then interest drops off a precipice when it comes to the certifications that assess somebody's competency in applying that knowledge.
I didn't know that. That's fascinating.
Well, I mean, we talk several orders of magnitude in terms of people who follow through. So in any professional development journey, you go from gaining the knowledge to applying that knowledge, gaining the experience, becoming competent, and that's what a good project manager is, a competent project manager, somebody who can apply the knowledge in the real world to good effect. So tools like the Praxis Method Grid are the things that get you from there to there. I've got the knowledge, it's in the grid, but the grid is going to help me apply it.
Yes.
And although this is all about, Method Grid is a great way of doing that, and it's one of the ways of doing it. From a Praxis point of view, it sits alongside things like Team Praxis, Praxis 360, Praxis Local, and Marvin, the AI, the sort of curated AI that we've developed in conjunction with partners. All of those things are helping people go from that gaining knowledge to applying knowledge and becoming competent. And this is what we're all about. And that's why I was so pleased that we've been able to collaborate on this Praxis Grid, because that fills another one of the gaps in the toolbox that gets people from knowledge to competency. Yeah,
I completely agree. And there is definitely a gap in going from knowledge to competency, just, from a wider perspective, clearly in that example you gave of that drop off, just purely from a certification point of view. I think it's one thing that we want to offer, and now it's probably about time to move on to the difference between the read-only option of Praxis and the difference between the enterprise part as well. But the enterprise solution, which I'll come on to in more detail, what we want to offer is that fully tailorable optionality for Praxis. So you can take the Praxis framework, but you're incorporating it completely into your own methodology, your own business practices, your own processes, your own tone and language and abbreviations, and applying the information that's in there completely to how you would do a specific process. It could be as minutiae a process that, whatever example it is, if it's in construction, or, it could be something of getting scaffolding up, but there's still a process behind it. And you have your own individual intellectual property or IP in terms of how you deliver it. And you can fully tailor that playbook to help you and that just helps level up the competency of people within your organization to take in that knowledge and then apply it when moving forward.
I agree, and I think clearly Praxis, the functions and processes that are in Praxis and have been imported into the Praxis Method Grid, they are not all applicable in all circumstances. And that is explained in the Praxis framework. So, for example, there's a series of functions in there on procurement and contract management. Well, if you're running an internal development of a web application, you don't need contract management and procurement. So rather than sort of have it there and not be using it, it's nice just to clear it out of the way. If you're a contractor delivering a project on behalf of a client, and you're delivering, if you're a construction contractor and you're delivering a building, it's not your job to do benefits management.
Yeah.
So maybe you just want to clear that off the end. So, we're very realistic that everything in Praxis is likely to be, you're going to pare out bits that you're not going to use, and then, as you say, tailor the bits that you retain.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's where the enterprise version comes in.
I'll probably use that as a jumping off point to describe a little bit more then in terms of what the separation is between read-only and an enterprise solution. So as Adrian mentioned, obviously Praxis is a free service. And so the Praxis read-only playbook is the playbooks held on MetaGrid in the visualization way that I previously described, that has functionality to it. So you can use it to associate to tasks. You've got all of the information in there in terms of the key stages of delivery around Praxis and some of the key themes in Praxis. So like the ones mentioned by Adrian just there, procurement, benefits management, stakeholder management, etc. All that information is there, but it is completely aligned to the purely Praxis framework information that's available online. But one of the different things that we're wanting to offer is this separation between that and the Praxis Enterprise solution, which is no longer a free version, it's worth mentioning. But that is an option to help implement and tailor a Praxis framework that is completely aligned to your organization. So that includes descriptions of aspects of the Praxis framework that say not only why do you do this in the Praxis framework, but why do we do this in our business? It includes tasks that might be purely associated to your business and the aspects of your delivery that you're doing at that time in the process. It will have references and guidance that are purely aligned to your own information, templates that are your own templates that you use, etc., etc. And there's a separation between the two. So both are fully usable, but one is free at the point of use, and one is has a cost associated to it, but the cost is associated to the tailoring of the playbook to match your own business methodology. So to continue that conversation around how Praxis and MetaGrid are working together, Adrian is a key contact for us in terms of helping us to build out this Praxis grid. So we've used your expertise and your knowledge and your understanding of Praxis as one of the co-founders and authors. You're probably the lead person to have that conversation with. And that has helped us create this foundational aspect of the Praxis read-only grid for people to use free at the point of service. It's worth mentioning that we are going to keep this consistently updated as we have done, as Adrian has done in terms of the Praxis information online. And we will feed that through into our grid to make sure that it is the most up-to-date knowledge and usability for Praxis. And again, like I mentioned, that will be the free version that will have all of that information in there. In terms of the tailoring aspect, as a business within MetaGrid, the general approach that we have when we're dealing with clients is that we do tailor grids for them for their own businesses and methodology. So I think if I take a second to just outline some of the benefits that we see when we do tailor playbooks to specific businesses, and how that would apply then to Praxis and either bringing it into your organization or elevating it if it's in your organization already. So one of the key things is faster adoption and consistent use of your methodology. So by tailoring it to your own language, it automatically feels familiar for your own staff. It follows your own business processes, is your tone and your language. And because it's applied across the board in terms of one grid that all of your staff can use, it'll be consistent in its delivery. It's one of the main things that we try to solve as an organization at MetaGrid, is helping you get consistent delivery from your staff. It's a big gap in project management delivery. Another is clearer decision making and accountability. So removing that ambiguity by defining responsibilities, outputs, and outcomes, so aligned to roles and individuals, specific outputs, outcomes, and responsibilities within your business. And then taking those outcomes and embedding it into something we already spoke about, which is that good practice, best practice process. So taking that theory and moving it into day-to-day delivery are some of the kind of 3 key benefits that tailoring the playbook could have. So this method grid and Praxis solution is offering both guidance, so your knowledge management aspect of delivery, alongside that project management aspect of delivery. As we previously mentioned, it's about providing the information at the right moment, at the right time, in the right stage, and across the right theme, rather than completely drowning your team in information, which is one of the key things we want to do as part of this delivery. And Method Grid is it's a live document, and we are an organization who are constantly developing and growing and trying to look to the future to understand what areas we can best improve the platform that we're offering. So just to give a very brief outline of some of the things that are on our product roadmap and would therefore be incorporated into the Praxis playbook if it was something that you wanted to use. So we're heavily, I know it's a buzzword, but we're heavily looking into AI and how we can help develop our software and prototypes using AI. As Adrian mentioned, there is an AI tool called Marvin that is accessible alongside Praxis that you can ask it questions to. And some of the things that we're going to do within our own organization that are on our product roadmap and fastly becoming no longer beta versions and actually being implemented are, so one thing are AI chat features. So let's say you've built your grid, you've got it completely tailored to your own organization or not, and it's just a read-only version, and you want to start asking it questions. You can ask it very specific questions such as, I'm at this stage in the delivery. Would it be appropriate for me to do X or Y? Can you tell me how many deliverables are green, amber, or red? Can I run a report on expected time of delivery? All of these kind of things that you can include as part of an AI chat feature to ask questions to. Another thing that we're bringing out soon is AI quality assurance. So if you have documents that you are producing, according to the information that's in your Praxis framework grid, whether tailored or not, you can quality assure that document based on the information that's across the grid. So it doesn't meet the expectations of delivery, doesn't meet the description of what is required at this stage and as part of this deliverable. Has it ticked off all of the tasks that needed to be ticked off, etc.? Does it link to some of the references or templates that are already in the grid? And finally, another one that we're doing is AI document drafting. So if you've already embedded so much information in there in terms of how a deliverable should be produced, why can't you press a button and have an initial deliverable built if it's specifically a document? And that's something that we're going to release at some point in 2026. And all of that will sit alongside our current AI content generation model, which is completely based off your own business documents and methodology. So if you want to generate content within the Method Grid platform, but you are slightly afraid of using some of the online AI tools that may fish information off the internet or share valuable information that is your own business's, we provide an opportunity for you to upload your business documents, your business methodology, whatever it may be, and any questions or any content generation that comes off the back of it is purely based on your own documentation, methodology, tone, language, processes, etc.
I think that AI example is a great way to look at how Praxis and MetaGrid work together. As I said before, they're completely meshed and complementary, and at a fundamental level, they work well together. So on the AI side, if you're using a grid and you want to use AI to handle your internal documentation, then the AI that's built into the grid is great. That's what it's designed to do. And within the grid, there are links to the corresponding pages on the Praxis Framework website. So you can flip between one and the other. And on the Praxis Framework website is a different AI, which contains lots of unique, copyrighted, curated material from the big wide world. So there are many well-respected authors who donated their copyrighted material to the Marvin knowledge base. So that's where you ask make the general inquiries about the broader project management body of knowledge, separately but very closely aligned with the very specific AI conversations you'll have within MetaGrid about your own internal documentation and lessons learned and so on. And the two, everywhere you look, the two things just fit so well together.
You're right, they do work in conjunction really well. And having used Marvin myself, it is a great tool to use to ask those generalized questions within the project management profession. And like Adrian mentioned, it's something that throughout the grid will link out to, so that if you wanted to get further information, it's a great way to get further information. Section 6, Praxis Enterprise and tailoring it to real organizations. So we've spoken a lot about what Praxis Enterprise is and its tailored solution, but how does the implementation of that tailored solution look like? I think we'll touch on this briefly as we bring this conversation to a close. So the way that we go about implementations of a tailored solution, we initially start by having an implementation workshop where we'll understand what needs to change. We'll sit down as a group in person and do what needs to change across the Praxis framework for it to be a more applied structure to your business. Like the examples Adrian gave earlier, that may include the fact that you don't do benefits management. So we can remove that as a theme and any associated elements that aren't being used. It may be that you don't do procurement. We can remove that. It may be that you have a very heavy emphasis on the identification stage and there is more information that's required there, and we can sit down. That then provides us with the structure that we can then go forward with. We would then look to be building a prototype that doesn't have the huge amount of content built in there, but gives us a starter for 10 and engage across multiple subject matter experts or stakeholders within your business to help elevate that prototype into something that could be piloted as part of a rollout. That usually takes somewhere between 6 to 8 weeks, sometimes 12 weeks if you're a larger business, to take that prototype into an elevated point that it can be rolled out. We'll then take approximately 2 or 3 weeks to plan for that pilot, engage in classic change management processes and conversations. So how are we going to embed this? How do we train people? Identifying super users who can help train people across your business. And the ultimate idea is that as a tool, you as an organization are so used to using the tool and understand how to use the tool completely that we can walk away and you can use it independently from us. We won't walk away completely. We'll also leave you with an account manager and some customer support staff that can help you with anything that any questions you ever have as you're using your Praxis Enterprise solution daily or day-to-day across your business. And that can help with any additional training sessions you want to use, any changes to the platform that you'd like to offer to us, anything in that area. So coming back to you, Adrian, in terms of what have you seen when taking that Praxis solution and tailoring it? What are some great examples that you've seen in your career history of doing that?
The example I'd like to give you is to do with the tool we call Praxis 360. So this is the tool that's based on that book I mentioned, the Checklist Manifesto, with the 40% increase in surgical mortality. Oh, sorry, reduction in surgical mortality. We had a large organization who used that, and in itself it's quite tailorable in that you pick and choose the functions and the processes that you want to assess, and then you do your 360 assessment. Now, the organization that used it to assess all the projects and programs in 4 portfolios in their entire organization said to us that there was something additional that they wanted the tool to do. There was an additional way they wanted to tailor it to their particular use. So we said, well, that's fine, bearing in mind that this is something that we give away for free. If they wanted that feature, they would have to fund it. And they said, okay, yeah, that's fine, we'll fund it. And then we said, and it would be awfully nice of you if, having funded that feature, you would then allow us to make it available to anybody else for free. And they said, yeah, all right then. So, you know, it's just an indicator that a particular example of somebody who wants to tailor Praxis, become part of that community, gain the benefit of the tailoring for themselves, but then allow it to be offered to anybody else.
Yeah.
And you know, that one of the things we say on the right up front on the website is that this is a community-driven framework. So people have come along and offered different enhancements, and they've provided those enhancements that we can then give away for free, as I say, like Team Praxis and Marvin. And now the read-only playbook in MethodGrid. So yeah, we're building that community that's developing these tools for the profession all the time and giving them away.
Yeah, I think that is it's something that I've noticed since kind of working alongside you, is that Praxis community is ever expanding, and by giving more people access to it, you're engaging more people and creating incentive for people to then give as they have engaged with it, and the use that they've got from it, to do the same for other people. So I think it's really commendable, and getting more people engaged in how to become an effective project manager, not just from that knowledge aspect, but also from that competency aspect as well, and getting the information down from the heads of people that are ultimately retiring, and a lot of that information is stored in their own brains, is getting it down to the younger generation so that they can then take on that experience to a certain extent, and use it to then help continue the progression of the profession, is really valuable.
Yeah, it's interesting. What you say there reminds me of, again, something which people are, I think, tending to lose sight of, in that when they talk about the body of knowledge is the sum total of the explicit and implicit knowledge in all the members of the profession, whether they be practitioners, academics, whether they be project managers or project sponsors. So any guidance that you follow, any brand that you follow for methodologies and bodies of knowledge, these are purely guides to that enormous body of knowledge which is out there.
Yeah.
And you know, far too many people live in bubbles where they think their particular guide to the body of knowledge is all they need to know. But it is just a launch pad. And again, I feel that so many of this guidance that is available doesn't actually spring off that launch pad. It treats it as an end in itself.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do with that community is to constantly provide the things that allow you to move beyond that initial guide to the body of knowledge to the full, broad, diverse body of knowledge.
100%. And I think on that note, we can bring this conversation to a close. Thank you very much for your time, Adrian. That was both insightful and incredibly useful, even for me. I hope that anybody listening has also felt the same. If anybody listening is interested in learning more about the MetaGrid Praxis collaboration, then there will be links provided when we are sharing this information. And like we said, it's free at the point of use. So please feel free to click in and have a look and see if it would apply for you.
Thanks very much, Luke. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everybody.